Hi, I'm Gene Triplett. I'm here with everybody from the entertainment desk of the Oklahoman and newsok.com. That would be George Lang, Brandy McDonnell, and Matt Price. And we're here to talk about the 81st annual Oscar nominations, which have just been announced. And we're here to talk about our choices for the most deserving winners in the top 5 categories, which would be, we're going to look at Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Director. And so I'll start it off with Best Director. I think Danny Boyle should get it for Slumdog Millionaire. I think it's a life-celebrating rags-to-riches love story of a young boy rising from the depths of poverty in Mumbai to become a contestant on India's version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And I think it was one of the most original surprises of the year. He really made this an exhilarating and exuberantly optimistic tribute to the power of love and knowledge and the human spirit. So I think Danny Boyle deserves the Best Director trophy. What do you guys think?
Well, I think absolutely right. I was really close to saying David Fincher, but in this case, in a way, the rise of Danny Boyle is sort of paralleled in Slumdog Millionaire. I mean, this is a guy who's been sort of an underdog in the industry and has been making great films for a long time. Some personal favorites of ours, Millions, of course, Trainspotting, just an amazing and really varied director, and I think he surprised a lot of people by going even more out of his normal realm with Slumdog, and I mean it's a great sort of modern Dickens type story, and I think he brought it to the screen just beautifully.
Well, and I think that it's a year that you see a lot of directors who are doing some of their very best work in areas that we haven't really seen them do before. I mean, Boyle obviously does a lot of really diverse things, but Fincher with Benjamin Button, that was something completely different from what he'd ever done before. Absolutely. Ron Howard, Oklahoma native, doing some of his best work in Frost Nixon, but I definitely think you have to give it to Danny Boyle. This movie is just one of my favorite movies I've ever seen. I'm a huge fan of it, and it's just, he makes that movie.
All right, let me add to the crowd here and say I agree with Danny Boyle. I would point out something that we may get into a little bit later. Christopher Nolan, I think, deserved one of these slots.
Yes.
For The Dark Knight, given the scope of that film. If it had been if you had the exact same movie only with instead of Batman and Michael Corleone in it, this movie is getting all kinds of nominations.
I totally agree.
I can't really argue that much with some of the nominees, although I'm not sure about Stephen Daldry getting this nomination. And as much as I like our local tide, Ron Howard, I'm not sure Frost Nixon was the most. I'm not sure he nailed all the visuals in that the way that you could. Some of the metaphor of seeing Nixon on television and that being what kind of brought this all down, that wasn't really communicated like it was in the stage play. So, right. Although I still don't have a problem with him getting the nomination at all, but I would point out I think Christopher Nolan is one of the more egregious people left off this nominee list, and I think we'll talk a little more about some other places where that may have happened.
Right.
Sure.
I neglected to mention who the nominees are in the director category. That's David Fincher for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Ron Howard for Frost Nixon, Gus Van Sant for Milk, Stephen Daldry for The Reader, and Danny Boyle for Slumdog Millionaire. And now we'll move on to Best Supporting Actor. And the nominees in that category are Josh Brolin for Milk, Robert Downey Jr. for Tropic Thunder, Philip Seymour Hoffman for Doubt, Heath Ledger for The Dark Knight, and Michael Shannon for Revolutionary Road. And I think it's very interesting to note that today, the day of the announcements, marks the 1-year anniversary of Heath Ledger's death. He's also, I think, going to be a big sentimental favorite among voters. The way he disappeared into this darker, creepier, and much more menacing version of the Joker was just unforgettable. So definitely Oscar-worthy and
I think
deserving.
He's pretty much a shoo-in. I don't think there's really a contest anymore. Although Josh Brolin was terrific in Milk, I really don't think anybody else stands a chance. And if we're talking about egregious being overlooked in this category, I definitely think that there James Franco also deserved a nomination for Milk. I thought his performance was really, really good. Right. But I don't think that there's any question that everybody else is pulling for second here.
You could have almost filled this whole category with actors from Milk, because Emile Hirsch gave a great performance, James Franco gave a great performance, as did Josh Brolin. Obviously, you probably wouldn't put three people from the same movie in the nominations, but all those guys gave performances that I thought were supporting actor nomination caliber. That said, I think Heath Ledger is the far and away favorite. And it's a little weird, although sometimes these things come up. Philip Seymour Hoffman being nominated for Doubt. There's essentially two people in that movie.
That's right. He could have been lead, but a lot of this is positioning and how the studios sort of campaign on behalf of their performers. If they campaigned for Philip Seymour Hoffman for supporting actor, it was probably because they thought he had a better shot at it. In that category. But I don't think anybody has a good shot at it in the category other than Heath Ledger in this case. I mean, everybody's strong in it, especially Robert Downey Jr. I would say that Robert Downey Jr. is playing basically, he's playing, at one point, he's playing an actor playing a type, playing another type. Right. And it's an extraordinary and a comic performance, which is kind of, which we don't see that often being nominated. But I still think, and I'm not a big fan of external circumstances coming into play for wins.
Obviously they do here, too.
In this case, it doesn't, whether or not, it's a great tragedy that we've lost Heath Ledger. If he were alive today, he'd still be in there, and he'd still probably win it.
All right, I agree. I totally agree. I think that even if he hadn't passed so tragically, we would still see him definitely a frontrunner.
All right.
Moving on to Best Supporting Actress, we have Amy Adams in Doubt, Penelope Cruz and Vicky Cristina Barcelona, Viola Davis in Doubt, Taraji P. Henson in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and Marissa Tomei in The Wrestler. My favorite is Marissa Tomei. Her aging pole dancer character in The Wrestler, as the only confidant and friend of Mickey Rourke's character, really rips at the heart and helps make the movie work as it does, I think. It was really a gutsy performance for her because, like her character in real life, she's reaching the middle-age stage of her career. So very good, sympathetic performance.
Right. For me, it's a tie because I think Penelope Cruz is amazing in Vicky Cristina Barcelona, and there are certain there's a lot of great performances in the film. Rebecca Hall is great, Javier Bardem, but whenever Penelope Cruz is in the camera lens, I mean, she is just extraordinary. I mean, just electric, and the kind of work that she does for Almodovar, she's doing there. But I personally want Marissa Tomei to win this because she's been doing great work lately. Last year, in 2007, for Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, she was amazing there. She does just as well here in The Wrestler. And also, I'd like to see her win just because I think she's been slagged off a lot ever since her win for back in the early '90s for My Cousin Vinny. A lot of people said that it was a mistake that she won. I'd like to see her win this fair and square, and I think she would.
I think this is the wild card category, really. I think this one, there's no telling which way it's going to go with some of these. But my personal favorite is Taraji P. Henson from Benjamin Button. I noticed we all kind of have a little bit of a different take on it, but I just thought she did a great job in a role that was essentially kind of a thankless role in this film, and really made it fantastic. I've been a fan of hers for a long time. She's been doing great work under the radar, and so I really think that this for her was a great jumping off point.
You've got two really good performances in Doubt. Viola Davis is in it for about 5 minutes, maybe, and tears up the screen.
Right.
And Taraji P. Henson does a nice job in a role that could have been more overshadowed. But I've got to agree with Mr. Tomei being really kind of holds that film together in a lot of ways. Obviously, we'll talk about Mickey Rourke here in a little bit, but her contrast to what's going on in Mickey Rourke's life makes that movie work, and I think she deserves the award for this one.
All right. Well, moving on to Best Actress, we have Anne Hathaway nominated for Rachel Getting Married, Angelina Jolie for Changeling, Melissa Leo for Frozen River, and Meryl Streep for Doubt, and Kate Winslet for The Reader. And my favorite is Anne Hathaway. I think she finally proved her mettle as a dramatic heavy hitter in this really emotionally volatile and fragile character in Rachel Getting Married. And I just think she did a fantastic job, and hopefully now that she's got this on her resume, she can maybe avoid mistakes like Get Smart and Bride Wars and other movies that are beneath her abilities. So.
You don't think she deserves an Oscar for Bride Wars?
And I think we've talked about Bride Wars as being one of the movie that you make when you don't realize that you've just made Rachel Getting Married and what that's going to do for you. But I have to say for Anne Hathaway, the first time I interviewed her was probably 5 years ago for one of those type movies, Ella Enchanted, which people barely remember at this point. It was a fantasy, and but even then, watching her in that, you could tell that there was a certain spark there, an intelligence that comes through on the screen that that was going to carry her if she got the right roles. And in this, in Rachel Getting Married, she's just, electric. There's a couple of points there where you feel like you're watching somebody completely break down for real. I think that that scene in the car after she leaves her mother's house is just stunning. So I think she's really proved that she's that she's A-list. I don't know if she'll win it or not because a lot of times the Academy says, she's got time. She's young. She's 26 years old. She's got her whole life ahead of her.
Of course, it's the anniversary of Heath Ledger's death today, so maybe she doesn't. So I hope that she does.
Don't toll the bell.
Oh well, I'm not going to. But she's got a great performance. But for me, Melissa Leo from Frozen River, I said I would have a picket sign on my blog if she didn't get nominated, because I'm not allowed to picket the Oscars, I don't think. But we're talking about a veteran actress. People probably remember her best from the 90s from Homicide: Life on the Street, and she is just a terrific actress. This was her first starring role. This was the first chance she's ever had in her whole life, doing this for decades, to be able to carry a movie. Which is a pretty sad statement about the state of the movie industry. But she does this terrific job. It's an incredibly gutsy performance. Just lets it all go out there. And this single mother who is struggling so hard to get, of all things, a double-wide trailer for her kids so her kids won't be cold in the winter, who is willing to go to these incredible lengths, gets into this illegal smuggling and things like that. And it's an incredible film and an incredible performance, and it's very, very well deserved if she were to win.
A couple strange things in this one that we talked about. Kate Winslet is actually in The Reader less than she's in Revolutionary Road,
right.
But gets the nomination as Best Actress for The Reader. Also, a couple smaller films, Happy Go Lucky and Wendy and Lucy, I thought might have pulled nominations in this category, but it looks like most of these are from at least more powerful studios. Mm-hmm. I would agree with Anne Hathaway as being a good pick, and you've got a good list here. It seems like it was a little more slanted towards the more powerful studios.
Right.
This year.
Where is Sally Hawkins?
Yes.
Right. Because that her performance in Happy Go Lucky, it carries the film. It doesn't exist without her, really. Right. With the exception of a great performance by Eddie Marsan, who could have been nominated as well for supporting actor.
Right.
Okay. Best Actor: Richard Jenkins for The Visitor, Frank Langella for Frost Nixon, Sean Penn for Milk, Brad Pitt for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and Mickey Rourke for The Wrestler. And I have to go with Mickey Rourke. He resurrected his career with this performance. Even though I think he started his comeback with Sin City, I think he did a heck of a job. In fact, I think he kind of stole that thing when he was on the screen. But here in The Wrestler, he has this pitch-perfect performance in the title role as a man who's sold his life down the river for the tacky bright lights and fleeting macho stardom of the professional wrestling arena. And the story very much parallels Rourke's own career arc, I think, which just adds to it, to the weight of the thing. And he's finally come back around to the promise that he showed in the '80s in films like The Diner, The Pope of Greenwich Village, and Angel Heart. And I'd really like to see him get it. I think he deserves it. What do you know?
I mean, I hate this list because everybody's really great in it, and I mean, I think Frank Langella is just magnificent in Frost Nixon, and I was a big fan of Richard Jenkins' performance in The Visitor, but this one's important because I feel like this is one that could come down to a great performance by Sean Penn in Milk. And Rourke's performance. I'm going to give the edge to Rourke because he doesn't have the source material that Sean Penn had when he was preparing for Milk. I mean, there's tons of newsreel footage. There's the documentary, The Life and Times of Harvey Milk, that you can go to. Now, that doesn't denigrate his performance in it because because he brought this man to life. And a lot of people who knew Harvey Milk really admire his performance. But what Rourke did is he built this thing from the ground up, and he is investing absolutely everything. You can feel it when he's on screen. And I grew up, in my teens, I watched Mickey Rourke, thinking this is the guy who's going to be the great American actor. He's the heir to Brando and to De Niro. And when he appeared in Angel Heart, people talked about it like it was the meeting on Mount Olympus, because Rourke and De Niro were on screen together, and then it was all gone. I talked about this in my review, which runs this weekend. You don't really realize that something is wrong, that in the industry until it's kind of pointed out. And having Rourke return, after all these years of playing really bit parts and only really coming back in a big way with Sin City a couple of years ago, you go, we've really missed this guy, and he showed us what we've been missing in The Wrestler.
Well, I think that he's definitely, it's interesting because Hollywood loves an underdog. I mean, look at the movies that they release. And I think that this is a case where the underdog has now become the front runner because I definitely think he's the guy to beat. He's the sentimental favorite. I like you, I feel a bit sorry for Richard Jenkins that his great role comes up. I mean, and his great performance in The Visitor, very great movie, very overlooked movie, comes up this year. And Frank Langella in Frost Nixon, he was incredible as Nixon. This is a character, an individual who's been caricatured so often. Sure. And yet there's no caricature in his performance as Nixon. It's a really great performance. And I think Frank Langella's been overlooked for the last few years in some movies that he played a really great parts in, really strong performances. So I'd like to see one of those two win, but I really admired Rourke's performance in The Wrestler. He really made that movie what it was, and I don't think you can argue if he wins.
Yeah, I'd agree with Mickey Rourke. This is a good list. I think these are all people who could have won in some years.
Absolutely.
And I think it will probably be down to Mickey Rourke and Sean Penn, but for my personal vote, I would say Mickey Rourke for a lot of the same reasons we've talked about. It seems like after years of whatever problems he had, not getting in the right roles, having his own personal problems, he's now choosing his roles very well, with both Marvin, Sin City, and the role in The Wrestler being roles that seem exactly to fit what he can do on screen and to really show that off. So I'm glad to see that he's back in that groove, and hopefully he can stay there, and it would be nice to see him rewarded for it. So.
Well, there really are roles that sort of reflect what's been going on with him, too. They're really personal roles, which probably plays a part in him doing so well.
Yeah, I think so. Best Picture. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Frost Nixon, Milk, The Reader, and Slumdog Millionaire. And I guess this category holds the biggest surprise in that The Dark Knight didn't make the cut for this. I'm personally disappointed that The Wrestler didn't make it, but I'm going to have to go with Milk, because I think together director Gus Van Sant and his star Sean Penn delivered a really brave and stirring indictment of prejudice and ignorance and hatred in America. And it was a tough call for me picking Mickey Rourke over Sean Penn for Best Actor, but he came in a close second for his really courageous and transformative performance as gay activist Harvey Milk. And I think the film's message alone made it one of the most important films of the year. So,
right. Well, my pick is going to be Slumdog Millionaire because it's not The Dark Knight. You know, if The Dark Knight had been nominated, I would have picked it. I thought it was just an incredibly evocative, epic, epic storytelling, and I mean, and really took the comic book film to another level when we thought that Batman Begins took it to another level. This was just this was stratospheric. Incredible storytelling and some great performances all around. I mean, we're not just talking about Heath Ledger. I think all around there was some remarkable acting going on in The Dark Knight. So I would have picked it, but as it is, Slumdog Millionaire is just one of those transcendent films, and I think it's it's my pick.
I also am going to pick Slumdog Millionaire just because it's as I said, it's just one of my favorite movies, probably of all time. I mean. That I've just seen almost an embarrassing number of times at this point. And but I am also disappointed that The Dark Knight is not here. I'm disappointed to see that The Wrestler is not here. I'm a little disappointed, although I didn't expect to see Frozen River be here. There were a lot of great movies out there that I thought I liked The Reader, but I did not think that it was Best Picture caliber at all. So there are some other movies that I would have liked to have seen in here. Slumdog Millionaire is far and away my favorite, but I definitely think that Christopher Nolan has done a great disservice this year.
I'll agree with the Slumdog Millionaire pick. It's an exhilarating film, and you might deserve to win even if The Dark Knight were in there, but don't you wish The Dark Knight were in there so we could have that matchup? Yes. And I really, with The Dark Knight and The Wrestler not being in there, I feel like they've kind of left out what were two of the films that probably should have been nominated, but The Dark Knight snub. I've already gotten messages this morning from people saying, "Wow, The Dark Knight, really got left off here." So obviously, it's not just us. People, who are seeing these nominations are thinking that The Dark Knight has been done a disservice as well.
What are we going to be talking about 20 years from now? About what was the pinnacle of 2008. I mean, are we going to be talking about The Reader, or are we going to be talking about The Dark Knight? I think The Dark Knight, was the film that I mean, I don't think that maybe commerce should come into play here at all, but I think that in terms of critical acclaim, very few films beat The Dark Knight. It's really a shame it's not here.
Right, best reviewed and most seen movie of the year, pretty much. So you'd think it would be considered by the Academy.
Yes.
Okay, well that's our take on the Oscar nominations from the Oklahoman and News OK, and we'll see how it all shakes out on February 22nd at the 81st Annual Academy Award ceremonies. But for now, I'm Gene Triplett with George Lang, Brandy McDonnell, and Matt Price, saying thanks for watching.